Hello and welcome to this Heroes of Blackreach tutorial video. This video is the third in a series of videos looking at firing in Heroes of Blackreach. So if you haven't seen the first two videos, then now would be a good time to go and check them out. In this video, we're going to be looking at firing special abilities. So there are many different units in Heroes of Blackreach, different infantry units, different vehicles, etc. And one of the main things that helps to differentiate those units are the special abilities that those units have. So that's things like Suppressing Fire, Fire on the Move, Machine Gunner, Frightening Shot. And these are some of the things that we're going to cover in this video. Okay, so let's dive in and have a look at Suppressive Fire. So any unit that has this symbol on its token is able to use the Suppressive Fire ability. So what do we mean by Suppressing Fire? Let's have a look at an example and see it in action. Okay, so we have that tactical unit at the bottom and we have this unit of orcs. So the idea behind Suppressive Fire is that you're not really trying to target the unit to kill them. You're merely trying to get them to go to ground and take cover. So when you're using Suppressing Fire, and for any special firing abilities, you need to declare it as part of your firing action. So when you're doing Suppressing Fire, then the attacker's combat value and all other bonuses are doubled. Now this sounds great, however, the attack cannot cause any hits. So let's look at how that works. So this Ultramarine unit has a combat value of +3 against infantry units. And the Ultramarine player decides to play this card as well, and that gives them a +1 to their firing action. So at the moment the Ultramarines have an attack value of 3 + 1. And remember, because we're doing Suppressing Fire, you need to double that. Next you roll the die like you do normally, and you add that together, and that gives the Ultramarine player a value of 13. So let's look at things from the Orc perspective now. So they have a defensive value of 4. They're in a terrain element which is giving them a +1 bonus. So they have a total defense of 5. So for each hit that you would score against that Orc unit, you place a suppressed marker down on that unit instead when you're doing Suppressing Fire. So in this case, since the Ultramarines have scored more than twice as many attack points as the Orcs have defense, you are going to be placing 2 suppressed markers down on that Orc unit. Remember that this Orc unit has a movement value of 3. With 2 suppressed markers on it, its movement value goes down to 0. So you've stopped that Orc unit from being able to move. And if that Orc unit tries to fire, then the suppressed markers will severely limit its ability to do any damage. Another thing to note is that whilst the unit is suppressed, it exerts no zone of control. And if you don't know what zone of control is, then check out the tutorial that I did on zone of control. So when you're playing the game, remember to take advantage of this Suppressing Fire because it can really penalize the enemy units. The next firing special ability is Fire on the Move. Again, this is a very commonly used firing special ability. It just so happens that this tactical unit, as well as having Suppressive Fire, also has Fire on the Move. So this is the symbol for Fire on the Move. And any unit that has this symbol can take advantage of this firing special ability. Again, let's see how this works with an example. So again, we have the same setup with the tactical unit and the Orcs. However, this time the Ultramarines are planning to run straight forward and into the terrain element directly opposite them. So just as was the case for Suppressing Fire, you need to declare that you're using Fire on the Move before you start moving. So in this case, the Ultramarine player has declared they're using Fire on the Move, and then they start moving forward towards their target destination. And as the Ultramarine player moves into each square, they have the option to perform that Fire on the Move attack. So it's as if we've frozen the action at this point, and now the Ultramarine player is going to be firing on the move across at that Orc unit. So let's resolve that attack. So the Ultramarines have an attack strength of 3. They're firing on the move. So the Fire on the Move icon contains a -2, and that refers to you getting a -2 modifier on your attack. So the Ultramarine player then rolls a die and comes up with an attack value of 4. When we look at the Orcs have a defensive value of 4 and they're inside that terrain, so they come up with a defense of 5. which means that in this particular scenario, trying to fire at those orcs on the move was not successful. So then the Ultramarine continues their movement into the building, and that is then the end of their turn. So I said there's a penalty for fire on the move, that -2 modifier. So if you had the burst into action card, then you could have played that just before you resolved the fire on the move action. And you would have been able, during this activation, to have gained the ability to fire on the move without penalty. So this is an example of where you could use that card to really change things, because that -2 modifier affected the Ultramarine's ability to hit that orc unit. The next firing special ability that I'm going to cover is Overwatch. And units that have this symbol on their token are able to perform an Overwatch special ability. So what is Overwatch? Well, let's see it in action and it'll all become clear. So let's go back to the same setup that we saw for fire on the move, but this time let's add the unit that has the Overwatch special ability in as well, and see how that can change the situation. So it's the Ultramarine's turn, and that tactical unit is trying to reach the square marked in red as before. So let's see what happens if the Ultramarine plays exactly as they did before. It moves forward towards that white square and does a fire on the move action at that slugger unit. So as the Ultramarine unit moves from its starting square one space forward towards its target, the tank busters can then use their Overwatch ability. Now, Overwatch allows you to fire on a unit during that unit's activation. It's a very powerful ability because when your opponent is moving, you can step in and take your firing action. So the tank busters haven't been activated, so they can use that Overwatch special ability. So even though it's the Ultramarine's turn, the Orc player interrupts with that tank buster unit and attacks the tactical squad. So the Orc player rolls a 5. That, coupled with its combat value, is enough to hit that Ultramarine unit that's out in the open. So that Ultramarine unit is hit, and assuming it fails any saving throws, then that unit will be damaged and the token is flipped over. So at that point, the Tank Busters unit has been activated, and so it gains an activated marker. Then it's back to the Ultramarine player who completes their turn. So then they continue with their fire on the move action. They don't hit the sluggers just like they didn't hit them before, and then they finish up inside that building. So this is a slightly contrived example because fire on the move actions are actually resolved before Overwatch. So in this particular situation, when the Ultramarine unit left its starting square, it could have targeted those tank busters before the tank busters could target them. However, I just wanted to set this up so that you could kind of see it relative to how it was in the previous example for fire on the move. So if you are going to be moving your unit through the arc of fire of a unit with Overwatch, then be very careful. So the next firing special ability I'm going to cover is Double Fire. So here we see a unit that has the Double Fire special ability. And the Double Fire special ability is indicated with this icon. So let's put that unit onto the battlefield and see what Double Fire actually means. So here we have the looters in a crater, and in the top right we have a tactical squad, and bottom left another tactical squad. So those looters have the Double Fire special ability, and as you might guess, that means they can fire at 2 different targets. And so in this case, these are the targets that the looters are going to fire at. And so you resolve a firing action against each one of those Ultramarine units in turn. So both Ultramarine units have taken a hit. The key thing to remember with this is that you take 2 shots, but they have to be different targets. Moving on, the next special ability is Twin Linked. So here we have a unit that has the Twin Linked ability, and the icon for Twin Linked looks like this. Again, let's move on and see this in action to understand what Twin Linked actually means. Okay, so at the bottom we have Captain Sicarius, and we have a unit of sluggers further up. So Captain Sicarius has the Twin Linked ability, and he's going to be targeting this unit of sluggers with a firing action. Now Twin Linked means that when you target the enemy, instead of rolling 1 die, you roll 2 and you pick the highest. So in this case, Captain Sicarius rolls a 1 and a 5. So because of that Twin Linked special ability, he can pick the higher of the 2 dice. In this case, he's able to pick the 5, which is enough to do a double hit against that unit. So Twin Linked just increases your odds when it comes to performing a firing action. So the next special ability I'm going to look at is Machine Gunner. So here we have a unit that has the Machine Gunner special ability. The icon that denotes Machine Gunner I've indicated here. So let's put that Predator tank onto the battle grid and see how we use the Machine Gun special ability. Okay, so here we have the Predator tank sat inside some ruins, and we have some orcs scattered about at the top of the battle grid. So this special ability can be applied to the primary weapon of that Predator tank. So I've just zoomed in on that so you can see things a bit more clearly. So when we're firing the primary weapon, we're going to be targeting those orcs. So we're going to be using that +4 modifier against infantry. So the Machine Gunner special ability allows you to target multiple units with a single firing action. So it's as if you've got your machine gun firing away and strafing across different units. So there are three key things that you have to remember when you're using the Machine Gunner special ability. The first is that you have to target the same type of unit, so infantry, light vehicles or heavy vehicles. And the second is that the units in question have to be no more than 2 squares away from each other. So those 2 units of sluggers on the top left, they're okay, they're close enough together, but that unit of sluggers on the right that's in the ruins is not close enough to those other units to be able to be involved in this machine gunner firing action. The third key thing to remember is that you have to split your combat value and any modifiers that it may have between each of the different units that you want to target. And before you roll your first die, you have to declare how you're going to split your combat value. So in this case, the Predator tank is choosing to split its combat value of 4 by giving a +2 to the first unit of sluggers and a +2 to the second unit of sluggers. And then all you do is just resolve the firing action against each unit in turn using those split combat values for each target. Also bear in mind that each unit that you target must gain at least a +1 from that split combat value. So that means that this Predator tank could target up to 4 different units, giving each of those units the minimum +1 combat value. So the next firing special ability I'm going to consider is Frightening Shot. So here we have a unit that has the Frightening Shot special ability, and I've indicated the Frightening Shot icon here. So here we have the Thunderfire cannon at the bottom of the battle grid, and we have some looters in a crater towards the top. So the Thunderfire cannon is going to be targeting those looters. So we're going to be using the alternate fire action, the B template. So we've placed that down onto the looters. Since it's an indirect fire weapon, we're going to be rolling to see which way it scatters. And let's assume that we roll a 5 or a 6 and it doesn't scatter. So that means that the template remains in the same position and that blast will hit the looters. The Thunderfire cannon uses the B template, which is a +4 combat value. We roll the die, that gives us a total of 5. However, in this case, the looters have a defensive value of 4 and they're inside a crater, giving them a total defense of 6. So we don't manage to score a hit against those looters. So we failed to hit or suppress the looters, and in that scenario, any unit that has the Frightening Shot special ability can place a suppressed marker onto the target unit. Another thing to bear in mind though is that you cannot use this Frightening Shot ability with the Machine Gunner special ability. The next special ability I'm going to look at is Munitions Carrier. So here we have a unit that has the Munitions Carrier special ability, and this is the icon that denotes the Munitions Carrier special ability. Let's see that in action and see how it works. So we have the Armorium Cherubim unit, and adjacent to that we have 2 tactical units. So when you're looking at the Munitions Carrier special ability, you need to take into account all of the squares that surround the unit with that special ability. So I've highlighted those squares in blue. And those squares correspond to the zone of control for that unit. Any unit that is inside that zone of control will gain a +1 ammo bonus to their firing action. So it's the equivalent of playing a +1 firing action with a card or an ammo token. You get that extra bonus, and you can combine that with a card or an ammo token as well to improve your firing even further if you wanted to. One thing to bear in mind is the unit that has the Munitions Carrier special ability does not gain that ability. So the munitions carrier only affects units that are inside its zone of control. The next firing special action is piercing. Here's a unit that has the piercing special ability, and the piercing special ability icon looks like this. Let's show another example and see how this works on the battle grid. So at the bottom I have a Predator tank, and as we've just seen, the Predator tank has that piercing special ability. And at the top there are two units. Directly opposite is Malagra, he's a big mech, and to the right is a battle wagon. So the piercing special ability applies to the secondary weapon of the Predator tank. So if we just zoom in on that section, we can see the values associated with that secondary weapon. So first of all, we're going to be targeting the battle wagon. So we're going to be using that +4 modifier. So the Ultramarine player rolls a 5, so the 5 plus the 4 is enough to cause a hit to that battle wagon. So I covered combat against vehicles in Firing Tutorial Part 1. So if it's not familiar to you, you should go back and have a look at that tutorial. So we've done a hit to that vehicle. The next thing we need to work out is where have we hit that vehicle? Where is the damage location? And it's at this point where piercing comes in. So when we're working out the damage location, we roll the die, and because we have the piercing special ability, we get to add an extra 1 to that damage location roll. So in that case, our damage location roll has a value of 4. Now normally, if you would roll a 2 or a 3, then we would have placed 2 suppressed markers on that battle wagon. However, because we rolled a 4, we've actually destroyed the secondary weapon on that vehicle. Arguably that's a better result. And so we place the token down onto the battle wagon, and the Orc player can no longer use their secondary weapon. Okay, so we've seen how the armor piercing special ability works with respect to vehicles. Now let's have a look at how it works with infantry. So let's instead target Malagra. So we resolve the firing action, we have a +2 against infantry, and we roll a 5. So at that point we have scored 7, which is enough to hit Malagra. However, the support tile associated with Malagra has a +4 saving throw on it. So normally Malagra would get a guaranteed saving throw because that +4 has a green background. However, because we're using the piercing special ability, firing into Malagra, he does not get a saving throw. So in this situation, Malagra would take a hit and he would be unable to save that. So we get to the final special ability in this video, and this is destruction. So I'm going to go through an example to show how destruction works. So here we have in the top right corner the destroyed Orc unit, and that destroyed unit effectively becomes a piece of scenery on the board. However, that piece of scenery can be targeted and destroyed and removed from the board. Any terrain element that has that little house symbol with a number inside it can be targeted for destruction. So in this case, the Vindicator at the bottom of the battle grid wants to try to remove that wreck so that other units can pass through that part of the battle grid. So the Vindicator has direct line of sight to that target, and he's going to be using his primary weapon. So you place the blast marker down on the target, and we're using the C part of the template for this weapon. And I've just zoomed in on that so you can see that a little bit more clearly. Previously we've been interested in the combat values. Now we're targeting a structure, we're interested in the destruction value. So above the letter C we can see an icon with the number 4 in it. So this number 4 tells us how many dice we're going to roll when we're trying to destroy this structure. So the Ultramarine player rolls their 4 dice. Next, any dice that are greater than or equal to 4 will cause 1 damage point to be inflicted on the structure. So that means that we've done 2 destruction points to that wreck. And we can place a token down on that to indicate that we've inflicted 2 destruction points on that wreck. So in this scenario, that wreck requires 4 destruction points in order to destroy it completely. So as soon as we've done 4 points of destruction, that wreck tile will be removed from the battle grid. So it will probably take another shot from that Vindicator in order to completely destroy that wreck. So if you like this video and you're interested in learning more about the game, then please subscribe. The next video will be on Assault. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.